Prince Andrew's name resurfaces once again, not through new interviews or public statements, but through chilling stills from Epstein's island compound. These freshly unveiled images, provided by the U.S. House Oversight Committee, paint a stark picture where power and exploitation collided. The focus is now on the spaces, private corridors, guest rooms, and eerily vacant areas tied to the trafficking scandal. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Andrew has admitted being on the island, yet denies all wrongdoing. But in the wake of Virginia Dre's allegations, which describe him in a group setting with underage girls, these photographs feel less like background noise and more like corroborating silence. Every frame is a confrontation with what's been denied and what's possibly still concealed. This isn't just another headline. It's a visual escalation. The release of these photographs shifts the conversation from hearsay to something harder to ignore. They suggest proximity, presence, and potential complicity. As federal files wait in the wings and legal scrutiny sharpens, Andrew's reluctance to fully engage with investigators casts an even longer shadow. The royal family may wish to move on, but the past, now frozen in high-resolution detail, keeps dragging the scandal back into view. The question is no longer just what happened, but how much more is waiting to be seen. It's been years since Prince Andrew's name first landed in the headlines next to Jeffrey Epstein's, and the stench of scandal has never really gone away. But just when you thought things had hit a grim plateau, the U.S. House Oversight Committee drops a new set of photos from inside Epstein's infamous private island. Photos that have instantly reopened the floodgates of scrutiny and dragged Andrew right back into public focus. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. These aren't leaked paparazzi shots or tabloid grabs. These are official, previously unreleased photographs documenting the layout, rooms, corridors, and private spaces of a Caribbean compound now synonymous with trafficking and abuse. And the second these images hit the public eye, the questions came rushing back. Because Andrew isn't just a name on Epstein's guest list. He admitted in 2019 that he visited the island. And now, with photographic evidence showing the very spaces where allegations were said to have taken place, that admission carries new weight. This wasn't a simple visit. Epstein's Island has long been described in testimonies as a central location for trafficking operations. According to multiple survivors, it wasn't just a private retreat. It was a stage where the abuse allegedly played out, which makes every corner of that island, every room in those photos, part of a much larger and deeply troubling puzzle. Virginia Drew, whose testimony has been public for years, specifically claimed she was involved in a group encounter with Prince Andrew and other young women on that very island. Andrew, for his part, has denied everything. He says he doesn't recall meeting her. He denies any misconduct. But the accumulation of evidence, the testimonies, the flight logs, the photos, and now the documented layout of the island, makes that denial harder and harder to accept at face value. This isn't just about optics. These photos could potentially serve as supporting evidence in broader investigations. The fact that they were released by the U.S. House Oversight Committee suggests they are being treated seriously as part of a renewed push for transparency in the Epstein case. And the timing? Not a coincidence. The release comes as federal files are expected to surface. Files that may contain even more damning material connecting Epstein's network to the people who moved in his circles. If Prince Andrew thought a settlement and a few years of silence would let this all fade into the background, he underestimated the gravity of what is tied to. Let's not forget, he already settled out of court with Drew. The terms were sealed, but reports place a figure around £12 million. That's a massive sum for someone maintaining their innocence. And while the payout avoided a public trial, it didn't come with any exoneration. If anything, it raised more eyebrows. Why settle for millions if there's nothing to hide? His strategy seemed clear. Deny everything publicly, pay quietly, and disappear from the royal front lines. It worked, temporarily. The palace stripped him of his titles, forced him out of the spotlight, and tried to recenter the narrative. But scandals this big don't go away with PR cleanup. Especially not when every few months, something new emerges to remind everyone just how deep this goes. And this time, it's visual. The released images include bedrooms, personal effects, hidden stairways, spaces that are now associated with trafficking testimony. spaces where guests reportedly stayed. And when you pair that with Andrew's own confirmation that he was on the island, it places him in a context he cannot shake. Even if he insists he saw nothing, did nothing, and remembers nothing, his name is now inextricably tied to those rooms. And for a royal who once represented Britain on the world stage, that association is catastrophic. His refusal to cooperate with law enforcement only deepens the suspicion. In 2020, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York went on record saying Andrew provided zero cooperation in their investigation. Not even a phone call. Not a statement. Nothing. And when someone claims innocence but avoids formal questioning, that silence tends to get interpreted as something else entirely. Meanwhile, the royal family has tried to draw a line under it. They removed Andrew from public duties. He is no longer His Royal Highness. His military honors are gone, and yet he still resides within royal properties. He still received protection. There's been no full separation, just an illusion of accountability. But these new revelations complicate that illusion. The photos serve as a reminder that Andrew's past isn't a closed chapter. It's an active question mark. And with federal files expected to drop soon, there's every possibility more connections could surface. More documents. More names. And perhaps more confirmation of the stories already told by survivors like Jufrey. This isn't about guilt by proximity. It's about a pattern of association, of denial, of silence, and of privilege. Andrew wasn't just friends with Epstein. He visited his homes. He stayed in his properties. He walked the very holes now photographed and released for the world to see. And no amount of "I don't recall" can erase that. What's also clear is that public opinion hasn't softened. The palace may be trying to turn the page, but the public hasn't. The combination of evasiveness and well-fueled insulation has only fueled resentment. Why should someone who refuses to cooperate with an international investigation be allowed to quietly retire behind royal walls? The release of these photos feels like a warning shot, a message that the case isn't closed, that more names might be coming, that no one is too protected to be questioned. And for Andrew, it's a harsh reminder that his attempts to rebuild his image are doomed without full transparency. Right now, all eyes on what's coming next. The federal documents could unearth new evidence, names, dates, witness testimonies. If Andrew's name appears again, in any form, the royal family's attempt at damage control will be obliterated. And if the documents reveal more guests, more trips, more connections, the scandal won't just be about Andrew. It will be about everyone who enabled it, everyone who stayed silent, everyone who pretended not to know. Because the real story here isn't just about one disgraced prince. It's about power and who gets to dodge accountability. It's about justice and who decides when it's been served. And it's about the institutions, monarchies, governments, legal systems that protect people like Andrew from ever facing real consequences. The palace may want this all to be over, but these photos prove it isn't. If anything, they reignited the very conversation they were hoping to bury. So, what's your take? Should Andrew be forced to testify? Will these photos finally push investigators to dig deeper? And what happens when the next round of files drops? Are more names about to fall? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like if you think this story still matters. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of how deep this goes. And subscribe for more breakdowns as the fallout continues to unfold. Because this isn't over. Not even close. Prince Andrew wanted the world to move on. He wanted the public memory to fade, for time to smooth over the jagged edges of the Epstein scandal, and for his name to quietly slide out of the headlines. But scandals like this don't just go away. Not when the truth is still unraveling in slow, painful detail. And especially not when the U.S. government releases photographic evidence from inside the very place where the darkest allegations began. When the House Oversight Committee released those images from Jeffrey Epstein's private island, they weren't just archiving history. They were pulling back the curtain on one of the most talked about, most politically protected, and most unresolved cases of the century. And for Prince Andrew, that curtain pull was a spotlight. Every image, every hallway, every bedroom, every seemingly mundane detail acts as a grim echo. They are not just photos of a luxurious Caribbean estate. They are the visual backdrop of countless allegations of abuse and trafficking. These are the walls that have heard stories we've only just begun to understand. These are the spaces where names like Virginia Giuffre say crimes were committed. And Andrew's name is right in the middle of that narrative. His acknowledge that he visited the island. That alone sets him apart from others who deny any physical presence. That admission places him squarely inside the story, in the very location now staring us in the face through government-released photos. No matter how many times he denies wrongdoing, that visit, that single confirmation, ties him permanently to the setting of one of the most disturbing abuse networks ever uncovered. It also begs a question: why was he there? Why was a senior royal, the son of Queen Elizabeth II, on an island known, even back then, for its association with Epstein's criminal behavior? Epstein had already been convicted in 2008. His name was no longer whispered in rumors. It was on court documents. And yet Andrew maintained his friendship. He kept showing up, even stayed at Epstein's properties, including the infamous Manhattan Mansion and the Caribbean island that now features so vividly in those haunting photos. Virginia Giuffre's testimony is clear. She says she was trafficked to Andrew as a teenager, that she was coerced into a group encounter involving him and other young women on Epstein's island. She's repeated that claim under oath. And while Andrew has denied the accusations repeatedly, saying he has no recollection of ever meeting her, the world has seen the now infamous photo of the two of them together, his hand around her waist, Ghislaine Maxwell smiling in the background. And now we've seen the island too, not through a survivor's description, but through direct documentation, from the inside, and it changes the tone of everything. The photos offer no smoking gun, but they don't need to. What they offer is a visceral reminder that the places described by survivors, rooms, private suites, spa areas, spaces where people say they were trafficked and abused, exist. They are real. They are preserved in images. And anyone who's been confirmed to have walked those halls has some serious explaining to do. Prince Andrew, to this day, has avoided formal questioning. The U.S. Justice Department publicly stated in 2020 that Andrew had offered zero cooperation with their investigation into Epstein. They wanted to speak with him. He declined. Even though survivors were stepping forward, even though names were being named, even though lawsuits were filed, he stayed silent. And then came the civil case. Virginia Giuffre filed suit against Andrew in U.S. federal court, and after months of legal maneuvers, he settled. The terms were confidential, but reports place a settlement around £12 million, an eye-watering sum for someone who maintains he did nothing wrong. And while settling is not an admission of guilt, it sure isn't an act of transparency either. So now, with these photos out in the world, the public is asking once again, what exactly happened on that island? Who else was there? What does Prince Andrew still refuse to answer? Because this scandal isn't just about him. It's about everyone who stood too close to Epstein for too long. Everyone who flew on his planes. Everyone who stayed at his homes. Everyone who took the meetings, made the deals, and stayed silent. The release of these images wasn't an isolated move. It was part of a broader effort by the U.S. House Oversight Committee to push for more transparency in the Epstein case. And there's more coming. Federal documents, sealed court records, redacted filings, unpublicized depositions are expected to be made public in the near future. Which means this isn't the final blow. It's just the beginning of another wave. And if Prince Andrew's name appears again in those files, the fallout will be immediate, because his credibility is already hanging by a thread. He's been stripped of his honorary military titles. His Her Royal Highness status is gone. He no longer appears in any official royal role, but has not been disowned. He's still living in Royal Lodge, still protected, still shielded by an institution that has, so far, avoided fully cutting ties. The monarchy has tried to move past him, tried to frame the scandal as something unfortunate, but isolated. But every time a new piece of evidence surfaces, that effort collapses, because the truth doesn't cooperate with PR strategy. And scandals involving abuse, trafficking, and institutional silence have a way of resurfacing, again and again. This isn't about a single man's reputation anymore. It's about how far powerful people will go to protect their own, about how influence can shape narratives, about how denial, deflection, and settlements are used as tools to dodge accountability. And it's about whether or not the truth can still break through those barriers. The island photos aren't graphic. They are quiet, but they say so much. They confirmed that this place was real, that it wasn't some urban legend, that the accounts from survivors are grounded in specific, physical spaces that now anyone can see. And for those of us watching from the outside, it removes the plausible deniability. You can't claim to have visited but been unaware anymore, not when the world is staring directly into the rooms where it all allegedly happened. And still, Andrew says nothing. No further statements. No cooperation with investigators. No push to clear his name with facts. Just a silence that stretches years long. A silence that, in the face of these revelations, sounds less like strategy and more like retreat. So, where does this go next? That depends on what the federal documents reveal. That depends on whether other names, equally powerful, equally protected, are dragged into the light. It depends on whether investigators finally get access to the corporation they've been asking for. But what we do know is this: the longer the silence goes on, the louder the questions get. And the longer the royal family continues to stand behind Andrew, however quietly, however unofficially, the more they tie their own image to his scandal. Because you can't claim moral authority while protecting someone accused of this level of misconduct. Not when the evidence is mounting. Not when survivors are still fighting to be believed. These photos are more than just images. They are a catalyst. They reopened the door many hoped had been closed for good. And now, the spotlight is back, right where it belongs. At this point, it's impossible to look at the Prince Andrew story without confronting the quiet hypocrisy that surrounds it. Here is a man tied to one of the most infamous criminals of the modern era, a man who admitted to visiting the epicenter of Epstein's trafficking operation, a man directly named in sworn testimony, and yet he's still living comfortably behind palace walls, still protected by an institution that claims to value honor, duty, and accountability. And somehow, we're supposed to believe that the scandal is behind him? Not anymore. The release of those newly surfaced photos from Epstein's Island blew the lid back of a scandal that was never really put to rest. Because no matter how many press statements or carefully managed public appearances a palace puts out, the truth has a habit of coming back, especially when it's tied to something as serious, as haunting, and as unresolved as this. The public isn't stupid. People know the difference between bad press and a legitimate, systemic failure. What we're dealing with here isn't a case of one man's lapse in judgment. It's a situation where one of the most visible, most powerful royal figures was friends with a convicted sex offender, repeatedly defended that friendship, and then mysteriously failed to see or admit what was going on in the exact locations now being documented by U.S. authorities. Rooms in the photos released show more than just decor. They show opportunity, context. They provide a setting for allegations that have been swirling for years. And more importantly, they make it that much harder for Andrew to claim ignorance. He can't play the confused guess when the very architecture of the island mirrors the testimonies that accuse him. The denials start to lose oxygen when the visuals match the accounts. Virginia Giuffre's story didn't come out of thin air. It's been consistent, detailed. It was part of a broader pattern of testimony from other survivors who described the island as a trap, not a retreat, not a getaway. A place where young girls were brought in under false pretenses, groomed, abused, and discarded. To see the rooms now, to really see them, adds another layer to that already damning narrative. And Andrew's response? Still nothing. No explanation. No apology. No cooperation. Not even an updated denial. Just silence. Royal, polished silence. And that silence is everything. Because when you're innocent, you don't hide. You don't dodge the investigators. You don't settle lawsuits with massive payouts. You don't bank on people forgetting. You talk. You clarify. You clear your name, if you can. But that's not what's happening. And the world notices. The fact that U.S. lawmakers are the ones pushing forward, releasing images, calling for transparency, and hinting at more files on the horizon, while the monarchy remains firmly behind the curtain, only amplifies the disconnect. One side is chasing the truth. The other is managing optics. And the contrast couldn't be more glaring. And here's the thing. This isn't just about Prince Andrew anymore. It's about what kind of message this sends. What it means when someone with power and status can avoid accountability while victims are left to fight for scraps of justice. It's about the credibility of institutions, whether they protect truth or protect their own. Because if a senior royal can fly to an island known for exploitation, be accused in sworn testimony of being involved in that exploitation, avoid law enforcement, settle out of court, and still live in protected estate with no trial, no charges, and no consequences, what does that say? And more importantly, who else is being protected? That's a question looming over the pending release of federal files tied to Epstein's case. Because Andrew isn't the only name that's ever been floated. The real fear, especially for the powerful, is that the evidence still coming might not just confirm old suspicions, but reveal new ones. For the monarchy, this is a nightmare scenario. Every document released, every name unredacted, every testimony unsealed threatens to shake their already fragile public image. They worked overtime to push the focus onto a new generation of royals, to turn the page. But the past doesn't stay buried, especially not when it's being unearthed by congressional committees. At this stage, Andrew's attempts to recover his reputation are over. That door has closed. The only thing left is damage control, if even that, because the damage has already been done, not just to his name, but to the credibility of the institution that continues to shield him. These new photos didn't show him directly, but they showed the place, the scene, the silence between the lines, and that was more than enough. So tell us what you think. Should Prince Andrew be legally forced to testify under oath? Do you think more people tied to Epstein will be exposed when the federal documents drop? And how much longer can the royal family avoid answering the questions that just keep piling up? Like, share, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe, because the spotlight isn't moving, and this story isn't over. Not even close.